What does a producer do? Or what is a producer? That is a question that I remember asking all the time when I was first starting as a filmmaker, and I hear it constantly, even from, relatively novice filmmakers. I hear from some experienced filmmakers who there is a kind of running joke of like, oh, nobody knows what a producer does. If anybody really knew what a producer does, it's a lot of stuff. It's also not always exciting, and a lot of the times it's pretty boring, so that's probably why producers don't go around saying, I like to make schedules and call sheets, because, come on, that's not very sexy. But that is a lot of what a producer does, except there's actually quite a few different types of producers. So in this video, I'm going to break down some of the different types of producers that there are, and hopefully you can walk away with this having a little bit better understanding of what the heck a producer does. Now, first and foremost is the just flat out what we call a producer. And that person usually is the person that shepherds the project from beginning until end, or is involved with the producing the content. And what I mean by this is usually they're not the hands-on person. If it's a super small crew, then maybe they are a hands-on person, but a lot of times it just means they buy the rights to a script, or even maybe they wrote something themselves, but they're the one hiring the other people that come onto the project. So they hire the director, they hire the writer, they hire the crew. Sometimes they, might procure the budget, or they hire the people that do procure the budget. They are the ones that are going to go to film markets or send a sales agent on their behalf to go to film markets after the film's made to hopefully sell the film on top of film festivals, of course. They do a lot, and basically the way I look at it is like a sports team. If you are a player on the sports team, maybe you'd be the actors or the crew, but the coach of the sports team is the director. Now, we all know, if you know anything about sports, that that's not the person that makes the big decisions, especially when it comes to trading players and how the stadium is built and all of these things. The owner of the franchise is the person that does that. So somebody owns the team, they hire the coach. The coach does a lot of the hard work. The coach does a lot of the creative, fun stuff that gets all the attention, and rightfully so, because it is a very hard and it is a very creative job that favors people that have unique visions. And it's the same way with directors. Directors totally deserve all of the acclaim that they get because it is their artistic vision that you are seeing on camera. It's the producer that helped make that possible. Another type of producer you'll hear often referred to is an executive producer, and you might have seen this in the credits and thought, oh, that's just the person that gave money. And sometimes that's the case, for sure. Mostly an executive producer is actually even above the producer. So this happens a lot in studio productions where a studio executive is the one that's considered the executive producer. They're deciding these are the films that are getting made under the Star Wars franchise. Now I'm going to assign this producer to manage this project. I'm going to assign this producer to manage this project, and the executive producer kind of oversees the whole thing. They might oversee a slate of films for an independent film company, or they definitely oversee slates and series of films in studios. This also, of course, kind of can be bought. It technically shouldn't be, according to the Producers Guild, but I've definitely seen that happen on indie films where they don't really follow the union crediting rules. But so basically that explains what an executive producer does. The difference usually means that they weren't hands-on involved with the film in a producing way. Sometimes this also can be given to actors that helped bring money, or they sometimes have their own camera crew that they work with. If they brought resources onto the project that financially help the project happen, a lot of times they'll get an executive producer role, even though they might not have ever picked up a pen or a spreadsheet or logged into Movie Magic, which is a software that producers use, if you didn't know that. Or Studio Binder. I like Studio Binder. There's a bunch of different softwares. Movie Magic's kind of okay, you don't care about this. Co-producer. What is a co-producer? A co-producer is usually someone that is working with the producers, but not exactly on the same scale. They might be brought in to just kind of project manage during the production or during the sale of the film or during the funding. They are very valuable, and really they act on the same level as a producer. Sometimes this will also be given to, if there's just a lot of producers, they'll just call themselves co-producers if there's no kind of head producer. So basically the bottom line with a co-producer is just that there's more than one producer and they're splitting up those tasks, not always equally, but they all get credit as co-producers instead of just producers. A line producer is something that I never knew existed until after I graduated college. And it's interesting because most of the work that I do, I would consider falling under line producing. Now, a line producer is the person that performs the actual tasks on set or during pre-production in the pre-production office. Usually a line producer is kind of done once post-production happens. They might still be involved a little bit with the logistics of post-production, but this is the person that does the scheduling. This is the person that makes the phone calls, or at least tells the right interns to make the right phone calls. They do the call sheets. They are the ones that are working in Movie Magic and Studio Binder to make sure the production runs flawlessly. The line producers often will get assigned on smaller projects too, and I mean smaller projects like $1 million projects where there's less interns in the office. They'll get assigned to make the phone calls to make sure actors are getting picked up from the office, that kind of stuff. So basically, the line producer is involved with the actual physical production of the logistics of the physical production of the movie. Now, there's also something called a unit production manager. A unit production manager only is working on set. That technically is how it's defined. You'll see these used interchangeably quite a bit because they do actually do a lot of the same work, but a line producer really does more than a unit production manager, or does it in a larger capacity than what a unit production manager does. The way that I like to look at line producer is that they keep things in line. So a line producer also can be in charge of making sure that SAG is getting paid, making sure that the union dues are getting adhered to the way that they need to, whether they're dues or fringe benefits. So they kind of sometimes can one up a producer. Let's say an executive producer is in charge and they hire the line producer. The line producer might be the one kind of nagging the producer to make sure that we're following the regulations of the state that we're filming in, that we are following the regulations of the union that we're working with. All of those things, they get to be the stick in the mud that tells people that no, we can't do that, or we really have to wrap things up, or we're gonna have to pay people overtime. The mysterious associate producer. And then he dies, so he can't tell you what an associate producer does. The funny thing is, I probably just can't tell you what an associate producer does because it's a kind of a fluff title. It's usually given to people that have done some kind of favor on the production, and that's not to say those favors aren't important. I know, especially on indie films, we definitely have associate producers. These are people that have helped consult on a certain level, maybe helped linked us up with a resource that we really needed, or linked us up to a person that linked us up to a resource we really needed. So it's totally a useful thing, and it's fair to give them credit for that. But so when you see associate producer, a lot of the times that doesn't mean they actually were physically working on the project. That does mean they contributed usually to the project in some way. This credit is also sometimes given to what people in the ad world might understand as what an associate is, or in retail, kind of the front line person that is doing a lot of the legwork for the producer. The producer might be lining everything up as a project manager, but not actually physically doing the work. The associate producer can be doing it. It's technically below the line if it's in that case, and if it's an associate producer credit that's just given for a favor that was done or to appease a writer or something like that, it doesn't count towards the Producers Guild. If you're interested in learning more about the Producers Guild, I will put a link to that in the description below. I'm not a member of the Producers Guild, but it is something, if that's specifically what you're interested in doing, and especially if you're interested in working on sets as a producer, a line producer, something like that, it's a really valuable resource that I've learned a ton from over the years as I've tried to comprehend what it is a producer does. When people started calling me that, I thought, maybe I should figure out what that is. But at the end of the day, it's different on basically every film. And that's kind of the case with almost every role. You can argue over and over and over and over again what the definition of this thing is versus this thing. The closest you're going to get is the union definitions. However, not everyone adheres to union rules, and credits definitely don't always adhere to union rules, especially if it's not a union production. So you can't really go by that necessarily, but it is a good guideline. So thank you for watching this video. I hope this was helpful for you. Let me know in the comments down below if there's another type of producer that you've heard of that you'd like to know what the heck it means, and if you want to argue with me about the way I defined one of these, or you're just happy that finally you know what the heck it is a producer does. So now you can brag to all your friends whenever they make that joke. Thank you for watching. I will see you in another video.